The radiator in my North York apartment had a rhythm, a hiss, a clank, and then a long wheezing sigh that sounded alarmingly human. It was the only music playing on Christmas Eve. I stood by the kitchenette, watching the kettle boil, trying to ignore the way the linoleum curled up at the corners of the floor like dried leaves. Down the hall, the world was different. Or at least, it was supposed to be. My daughter, Victoria, stood in the center of my living room. In this space, with its mismatched furniture and the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a geographical map of a forgotten country, she looked like a time traveler from a more golden era. Her coat was cashmere, a shade of cream that would have been ruined if she'd leaned against the wall in the hallway. Her diamond earrings caught the light from my single working floor lamp, casting fractured prisms against the peeling wallpaper. She was flipping through a stack of mail on the counter, mostly overdue utility notices I had carefully arranged. Face down, which she had absent-mindedly turned over. "Dad," she said, turning to face me. She wore that smile she had perfected for the camera flashes at the Foundation's gala sprite. Engaging, but not quite reaching the eyes. I wanted to ask you something before we head to the Richardsons' party. How are you enjoying the lakefront condo Marcus arranged for you? The one in Muskoka. I felt the ceramic handle of my coffee mug slip in my grip. I tightened my hold until my knuckles turned white. The what? The condo? Marcus said he set it up for you 6 months ago. A beautiful place on Lake Rasso. He told me you go there every weekend to relax. Get away from the city noise, work on your memoirs. Her voice was expectant, proud even. He said you loved the view of the pines. I set down the mug. I had to do it slowly, or I would have dropped it. The silence in the room grew heavy, displacing the air. "Victoria, sweetheart," I said, my voice sounding raspy, like dry leaves. "I've never been to any condo. I haven't left Toronto in over a year. I haven't seen a pine tree that wasn't wrapped in plastic since your mother passed." The smile didn't just fade. It shattered. It was a physical transformation, her facial muscles losing their tension, leaving her looking suddenly very young and very confused. "But ... double quotes," she trailed off. "He showed me photos. He showed me the deed transfer. Victoria." I stepped closer, smelling her expensive perfume, a scent of jasmine and money. "I have been here. Every weekend. You can check the sign-in sheet at the library where I volunteer. You can check the church registry." The hallway floor creaked. We both turned. Marcus stood in the doorway. He was a handsome man, the kind of handsome that comes from good nutrition, expensive barbers, and the absolute certainty that the world will bend to your will. But right now, the color was draining from his face, so fast he looked like a wax figure melting under heat. "Robert," Marcus said, his voice a practiced baritone, though it wavered. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Memory can be a tricky thing at your age." "I am 63, Marcus, not senile," I said, a sudden, cold anger replacing my shock. "And I know where I sleep at night. I sleep here, in this apartment where the heat works 3 days a week." Victoria looked at Marcus. Then she looked around the apartment. It was as if a filter had been removed from her eyes. For years, she had visited for 20 minutes at a time, always in a rush, always accepting my "I'm fine. Everything is great." At face value, because it was easier. Now, she really saw it. The duct tape on the arm of the chair. The space heater plugged into a surge protector. the draft coming from the window I'd stuffed with old newspapers. "The tax write-off," she whispered. The realization hit her like a physical blow. "The charitable living assistance grant, $850,000 for senior housing." Victoria Darning Marcus stepped forward, reaching for her arm. "This isn't the place." She recoiled as if he were a hot stove. "Where is the money, Marcus?" "The money for my father's housing." "It's complicated corporate structuring," Marcus snapped, his charm evaporating, replaced by the sneer of a man who believes he is surrounded by idiots. "I manage the assets to ensure liquidity for the foundation. Your father was a placeholder. A necessary narrative device." "A narrative device," I repeated. "I'm eating canned soup, Marcus." "And whose fault is that, Robert?" Marcus turned on me, aggressive now. "You could have asked. But no, you have your pride. You wanted to play the martyr, so I utilized that. I turned your stubborn poverty into a capital gain that kept the foundation afloat." "I did it for us, Victoria." Victoria pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the auditors. I'm calling the police." This is where the story should have ended. Marcus should have run. He should have begged. But he didn't. Marcus laughed. It was a dry, ugly sound. "Go ahead, Victoria," he said, checking his watch. "Call them. But before you do, you might want to remember whose signature is on the quarterly compliance reports. You might want to remember who technically chairs the oversight committee." Victoria froze, her thumb hovering over the screen. "I didn't just sign the checks, darling," Marcus said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. "I prepared them. You signed them. Every single fraudulent grant. The medical fund for Robert Patterson. Signed by Victoria Whitmore. The accessible vehicle grant. Signed by Victoria Whitmore. If I go down for fraud, you go down for gross negligence and conspiracy. You'll be the face of the scandal. The privileged daughter who stole millions in her father's name." The room fell into a terrifying silence. The radiator hissed again, mocking us. "Astris, you're bluffing," Victoria whispered, but her hand was trembling. "Am I?" Marcus walked over to my kitchenette and poured the water from the kettle into the sink, a petty display of dominance. "I have the emails, Victoria. The ones where I briefed you on the accounts, and you replied, 'Looks great, thanks,' without opening the attachments. Willful blindness is a crime, too. You want to destroy the foundation? You want to go to prison? Go ahead. Or we go to the Richardson party, we smile, and we fix this internally after the holidays." Victoria looked at me. Her eyes were wide, swimming with panic. She looked at the peeling wallpaper, then back at the man she had married. "Get out," she said. Her voice was low. "Excuse me." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Get out of my father's house." "I'm not going to the party. I'm staying here." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. He adjusted his cufflinks. "Fine. Sulk. Play the victim. But remember, Victoria, I control the accounts. The personal ones and the foundations. If you don't come home tonight, I'm freezing everything. You won't have access to a dime. Let's see how long you last in this ... squalor." He walked out. The door clicked shut. Victoria stood paralyzed for a full minute. Then her knees gave out. I caught her before she hit the linoleum, guiding her to the duct-taped armchair. She wasn't crying. She was hyperventilating. "He's right," she gasped. Dad, he's right. I signed everything. I didn't read them. I was too busy planning the galas, choosing the centerpieces. I signed whatever he put in front of me. We will figure this out, I said, rubbing her back like I used to when she was 6 and afraid of thunder. But first, take off that coat. It's too warm for in here. That night was the beginning of the siege. True to his word, Marcus moved fast. When Victoria tried to order food an hour later, her credit card was declined. She tried her bank app. Locked. She called the foundation's lawyer, but it was Christmas Eve, no answer. She was trapped in North York, in a blizzard, with a father. She hardly knew anymore, and 0 resources. I have some pierogies in the freezer, I said gently. Store brand, not the handmade ones your mother made. But they're edible. We ate in silence. The apartment was cold. I usually kept the thermostat at 64 degrees to save money, and the sudden drop in temperature outside was winning the war against my insulation. Victoria was shivering in her silk blouse. I went to my closet and pulled out my old wool sweater, the grey one with the moth hole in the shoulder. Put this on. She pulled it over her head. It swallowed her frame. It smells like Old Spice and dust, she said, a small, sad smile touching her lips. It smells like you. Is that a bad thing? No, she said softly. It's the most real thing I've smelled in years. The next 3 days were a brutal education for my daughter. Christmas Day wasn't about opening presents. It was about survival. The blizzard had knocked out a power line down the street, and my building, old and neglected, lost electricity for 12 hours. There was no concierge to call, no backup generator, just the encroaching grey cold. Victoria paced the small living room, her phone dead, wrapped in 3 of my blankets. How do you live like this? She asked, her teeth chatting. Dad, honestly, how have you done this for years? You adapt, I said, lighting the emergency candles I kept in the kitchen drawer. You wear layers. You read books instead of watching TV. You learn that comfort is a luxury, not a right. It shouldn't be, she snapped. Not when. Not when. We had millions. You didn't have millions, Victoria. The foundation did, or thought it did. I need to see the records, she said, stopping her pacing. I can't access the digital files because he changed the passwords. But he's a hoarder, Dad. Marcus keeps physical backups of everything. He doesn't trust the cloud completely. He keeps a safe in his office at the foundation headquarters. The office will be locked, I said. I have a key, she said. A physical key. He never took it back. Victoria, you have no car. I have no car. The subways are running on holiday schedule, and it's 20 below zero. She looked at me, her jaw set in a way I hadn't seen since she was a teenager, determined to learn. A difficult shopping piece. Then we take the bus. The journey to the downtown core on Boxing Day was a odyssey. Victoria, dressed in my oversized wool sweater, leggings, and her ruined cashmere coat, stood at the bus stop, clutching a transfer slip. She watched a woman struggle with a stroller in the snowbanks. Without thinking, Victoria stepped forward and lifted the front wheels, helping the woman board the bus. Thanks, love, the woman said, exhausted. Victoria stared at her hands. I've never done that, she whispered to me as we sat on the hard plastic seats. I've raised millions for mobility solutions, but I've never actually helped someone get on a bus. Charity from a distance is just writing checks, I said. This is living. We reached the Foundation's office building, a glass monolith on Bay Street. The security guard, a man I'd never met, recognized Victoria instantly, despite her disheveled appearance. Mrs. Whitmore, is everything all right? Everything is fine, Henry, she lied smoothly, channeling that old socialite grace. Just forgot some gifts in the office. My father is helping me carry them. We got up to the 40th floor. The office was silent, a tomb of mahogany and glass. Victoria went straight to Marcus's massive oak desk. Behind a painting of a ship, how cliché was the wall safe. Do you know the combination? I asked. It's his birthday, she said with a grimace. Narcissist. She spun the dial. Click the safe was full. Not just with papers, but with stack of cash, passports, and hard drives. Victoria pulled out the ledgers, the real ones, hand-annotated in Marcus's precise script. We sat on the floor of that multi-million-dollar office, illuminated only by the city lights below, and she began to read. Oh my God, she murmured, turning the pages. It's not just you. The Youth Arts Initiative. It doesn't exist. The money went to a shell company in the Caymans. The Clean Water Project. He bought a yacht. A literal yacht, Dad. He named it the Virtue. She was weeping. Now, angry, hot tears. I signed off on the yacht. I thought it was a research vessel. Keep looking, I said, my stomach churning. Look for the leverage. He said you were complicit. Find the proof that you weren't. She dug deeper. Hours passed. The sun began to set again. Here, she said, her voice shaking. She held up a black notebook. It's his diary of transactions. Look at this entry. I squinted at the handwriting. V is asking questions about the allocation. Must distract her with the Paris trip. Had her sign the Q3 batch while she was drunk. At the vineyard, she didn't even look at the pages. He documented his manipulation, I said. He wrote down that he tricked you. It proves intent, Victoria said, clutching the book to her chest. It proves I was a patsy, not a partner. Suddenly, the office lights blazed on. Marcus stood at the door, flanked by 2 private security guards. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo now. He was in a suit, looking sharp and dangerous. I got a notification that the silent alarm was triggered on the safe, Marcus said, sighing. You really are persistent, Victoria. I honestly thought a few days of poverty would break you. I thought you'd come crawling back for a hot shower. I prefer the cold. Victoria stood up. She looked ridiculous in my old sweater, yet she had never looked more formidable. It keeps you awake. Give me the book, Victoria. Marcus signaled the guards. Gentlemen, escort my wife out. She's having a mental health episode. If they touch me, Victoria said, her voice ringing off the glass walls, I will throw this book through that window. And then I will scream loud enough to bring the cleaning crew, the night watchman, and the police. It's 40 floors down, Marcus sneered. You won't break the glass. No, I stepped forward. I held up my phone. It was an old Android, cracked. Screen taped together, but the live stream is already running. Marcus froze. What? I learned how to use Facebook Live, I said. My friend at the library showed me. We are live, Marcus. Say hello to. Well, Currently, only 12 people are watching, but one of them is my friend Jerry, and Jerry loves to gossip. Marcus looked at the phone, then at the book. He lunged. I am 63, and my knees are bad. But I spent 37 years breaking up fights between high schoolers. I sidestepped him. Marcus crashed into the desk. Run, Victoria, I yelled. She didn't run. She grabbed a heavy crystal award Philanthropist of the Year from the shelf and hurled it at the fire alarm on the wall. The glass shattered. The klaxon began to wail.
The next 3 months were a blur of depositions, forensic accounting, and media storms. Because of the notebook and the fact that we had triggered the alarm ourselves, the narrative shifted. Victoria wasn't the accomplice. She was the whistleblower. But that didn't save her from the fallout. The foundation was dissolved. The assets were seized. Marcus was indicted on 40 counts of fraud and embezzlement. But the lawyers argued that Victoria, as a board member, was liable for restitution. She lost everything. The house in Forest Hill, the cars, the jewelry, the investments. To pay back the donors, she liquidated her entire life. It was a rainy Tuesday in April when the dust finally settled. I was sitting in my apartment, which was slightly warmer now, thanks to a new heater Victoria had insisted on buying with her first paycheck from her new job. The door opened. Victoria walked in. She was wearing jeans and a simple raincoat. No diamonds, no cashmere. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear. "It's done," she said, dropping her bag on the floor. "The settlement is finalized. I have exactly $4,000 to my name." "That's more than I had in 1998, I smiled. "Coffee? Please?" She sat at the small kitchen table. "Marcus got 10 years, she said. "He tried to cut a deal by blaming me, but the notebook sank him. The judge called him a moral vacuum." "And you?" "I'm barred from sitting on the board of a charity for 5 years, she said. "And I'm working as an administrative assistant at the public library. Jerry is my boss." "Jerry is a good man," I said, pouring the coffee. "He speaks highly of your filing skills." Victoria wrapped her hands around the mug, the same chipped mug she had almost dropped on Christmas Eve. "I'm sorry, Dad. I lost your condo. I lost the money that could have fixed your knees." "I don't need a condo," I said. "And my knees represent a life of honest work. I'm keeping them." She looked around the apartment. It was still small. It was still run down. But it was cleaner now. There were books on the table that we were reading together. There was a chore chart on the fridge. We were roommates now until she could save up for a place of her own. "I have an idea," she said suddenly. "Oh, no. No more foundations." "No," she shook her head. "Not a foundation, just action. I met a woman at the library today. She's an immigrant, a nurse. She's about to lose her accreditation because she can't afford the recertification fee. It's $500. And I have $4,000, Victoria said. I was thinking, maybe we pay it, directly. No overhead, no tax write-off. We just go down there and pay it." I looked at my daughter. The socialite was dead. The woman sitting in front of me had calluses on her hands from moving boxes, dark circles under her eyes from taking the night bus, and a spirit that burned brighter than any diamond she had ever worn. "Direct action," I nodded. "I like it, but we split it. I have some savings from the pension." "Deal." Part fee. The real Christmas. 8 months later, Christmas Eve arrived again. The radiator still hissed, but the window was properly sealed now. The smell in the apartment wasn't dust and Old Spice anymore. It was flour, butter, and roasting onions. Victoria was at the counter, covered in flour. She was wrestling with dough, trying to make her grandmother's pierogies. She wasn't wearing a coat. She was wearing an apron that said, "World's Okayest Cook." "You're rolling it too thick," I critiqued from the armchair. "If you're so smart, come help me," she laughed. "I'm supervising. It's a management position." There was a knock at the door. Victoria wiped her hands and went to answer it. Standing there was Sarah, the nurse we had helped in April. Beside her was her little boy. They were holding a tin of cookies. "We just wanted to stop by," Sarah said, her eyes shining. I got the job at General Hospital. I start Monday. Sarah, that's amazing, Victoria beamed, pulling her into a hug. There was no hesitation, no barrier of class or status. Just two women, standing in a hallway in North York, sharing a victory. Come in, I called out. We have pierogies. They are slightly too thick, but they are made with love. As the apartment filled with laughter and the clinking of cheap cutlery, I looked at my daughter. She was pouring tea for Sarah. She looked tired from her shift at the library, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She had zero net worth. She had no status. But as she threw her head back and laughed at something Sarah's son said, she looked richer than she ever had in the mansion on the hill. Marcus had stolen millions. He had stolen years. But he hadn't stolen this. Victoria caught my eye across the room. She raised her tea mug in a silent toast. To the truth, she mouthed. I raised mine back. To the truth. The champagne stayed corked. We drank the tea. It was hot, strong, and sweet. It tasted like redemption.